Good morning. This is Module 4 of COM540, Contemporary Expectations and Challenges for Professional Communicators. As indicated, I will be running an online lecture about this, but I thought I'd post it up as a lecture because quite often people can't get to the lecture, and I'll also be in the UK, so I thought if all else fails, we'll get it to you before then. So, let's get into it. So, Module 4 is an interesting module. There's a few key readings that I'm just going to unpack, which kind of give you an overview and a flow of the challenges that face professional communicators. And I couldn't resist putting this one up, and I think one of our biggest challenges is the fake news phenomenon, and I think what's happening across the world. And as I record this video today, in I think another hour's time, there's going to be a leadership spill for the Australian Prime Ministership, meaning our 7th Prime Minister in 10 years. So, and stuff is happening in other places, North America, etc. So the key concepts for the challenges are about identity, and what is the identity of professional communicators now, and the identity, the way you place yourself in the communication field. And that's a really important thing that you need to be exploring. The perception of professionalism. So how are you perceived as a professional? What is professionalism? And we look at this fake news, etc. as well, and all this, stuff that's happening, and how do communicators maintain and project that professionalism. The ethical dilemmas, there's a real question of ethics, transparency, international professional communication, and we'll unpack that. Globalisation, so how to operate in a transnational world influenced by local, regional, global politics, digital technologies and political and economic environments. The socially constructed nature of communication, so we need to let things emerge. And I'm just thinking these videos are about 15 minutes long, so if we get to a natural progression, I might just do this video in 2 parts. We'll just see how we go. Social media and ethics as well, because social media more and more is becoming pervasive, and we need to catch up with what that means. And corporate social responsibility and environmental sustainability are very important challenges for professional communication. So professionalism, identity, ethics and credibility. So I think the Brunton and Jeffrey paper is a real key paper for this module. And they note that professional status of communicators relies on substantive knowledge and the development of practical, specialised skills so that they form a coherent image of themselves and their peers. So really those skills are foremost. The authors quote Friedson, and if you wish to, you can go to that as a seminal work that I think all scholars, students should read, who states professionalism is a social contract that confers on members the legitimacy of authority over control of their work. Friedson also writes that a profession usually has control over an area of work through accreditation and a strong commitment to the group consistent with the public interest. Okay? And this is a really interesting quote, and I've put some of this up on the discussion forum. I'd like to see you using the discussion forum, particularly for this module, because I think it'll unlock stuff for you for Assessment 3. And I've posted a video of Assessment 3 separately. So unless communication management practice can be legitimised as a consistently credible, well-informed and value-driven occupation, the likelihood of attaining the strategic influence that underpins professional status will remain elusive. So considering your organisational communication role, how do you respond to this quote? And I want you to spend some time unpacking that and thinking about that. Would you meet the professionalism criteria stated by Brunton and Jeffrey and Friedson? What is the role of ethics in your work? Very important questions. Do you regularly access the body of knowledge of communication management? Associations, university study networks. So continually being curious and finding out more about those things is one of the skills that you need to have, one of those specialised skills to be able to have that professionalism. And what theories and research are you using to inform your practice? And lots of those are in this subject. So transparency and openness, and I really like this picture from Unsplash. I thought it was really good because it's a bit opaque, the transparency. So Christensen's paper asks fundamental questions about organisational openness in an age of transparency. So what sets corporate communication apart is that it aims to organise all organisations' communication into one coherent totality, and we'll talk about that as well. And an unambiguous image of what the organisation stands for. Increasing importance of transparency through compliance, media scrutiny, internal and external stakeholder expectations, social media and the internet. Transparency is a fundamental part of organisations' environmental diagnosis. So all of those things above are what expectations, but are they realistic? Do they really convey transparency? Or is it something that can't be attained or need not be attained? So the ideal of self-transparency is beyond reach. Rather, ambiguity instead of certainty is much more likely to be productive. So it's really important that we don't try to have everything certain, everything constrained, a policy procedure for everything, too much information provided to our publics and our stakeholders. It's too much, and it does not mean transparency. If we think we're going to do that and it means we're being transparent, we're not. That's the point they're making. Few consumers really care who the organisation behind the brand is. I thought that was a great quote. So making more information available to customers, external stakeholders did not equate to increased transparency. Is the staging of transparency simply a simulation of openness? What kind of measures will be needed to organisations to communicate openness to their surroundings? These are key questions that you need to be able to answer. Globalisation and natural disasters. Now, really important, the natural disaster phenomenon, particularly Fukushima, actually identified a number of things. The world is an intricate network of complex natural elements, people, systems and artefacts. The network is dynamic and its elements interact on a smaller or larger scale in predictable and unpredictable ways in a single place or in various places of the world at the same time. The elements of the network have no relationships, value and importance in themselves. They just exist. Rather, it is we, humans, that connect and interpret them so as to understand the world and be able to act in it. So it's those human relations that are important. International professional communication, and this paper's based on that, is essential for humans to be safe, interact with their environments, engage with their fellow human beings and make decisions and take action. And, this is an eruption. We're having more and more natural disasters and the world is a global village. We're much more connected. This is really important. This reading is really important in unpacking globalisation and what it means for us. So I want to ask you the question, how does IPC influence your communication practice or your organisation? And I urge you to read Volume 1, Issues 1 and 2 of Connections, which is the Durao paper, and latter issues for more information about the methodology, research and emerging theory of IPC. I think it will unlock a lot of stuff for you. Okay? So that's just a suggestion. Carrying on with globalisation, because I think it's so central to what we're doing now, raises vital questions today. Stark Meyering, how to operate in a transnational world influenced by local, regional and global politics, digital technology, political and economic environments, even more relevant, and it's even more relevant. This is 2005, this paper, even more relevant in 2018. So increasingly we work for or provide, people work for, communicators services to transnational corporations, work in global virtual teams and communicate in global networks. Communicators need to have plural literacies, which are multifaceted competencies involved in understanding, critically assessing and productively using the symbol systems, visual and verbal as well as multimedia systems of the cultures in which we function, including the technologies that mediate these symbol systems and the ideologies that drive the use of these symbol systems for specific purposes. There are 4 key literacies, and I've only brushed over these. I'd urge you to read them. This is a pivotal paper. Facilitating digital networking, understanding cultural identities and boundaries, I'll unpack that a bit more, fostering and recognising diversity of local and global discourses, and an understanding of the power relations and ideologies between global, local, corporate, professional and public interests. For professional communicators then, this shift towards communicating in open, participatory and network genres means that they need to understand how to connect and communicate across diverse cultural contexts to build, navigate and manage these communication and information networks. They need to be able to collaborate effectively and ethically in global networks using global network technologies to build trusting relationships and partnerships. Thus, globalisation, with its increasing complex and hybrid identities as well as blurred boundaries, lends new urgency to our need to shift our understanding of culture away from specifiable fixed boundaries, lists of traits ascribed to entire groups of people and homogeneous identities, and towards a view of cultures as constant creations, recreations and negotiations of imaginary boundaries between we and the others. Okay, so what they're saying here is, because I teach culture difference and leadership, we cannot just say people from China are like this, people from Asia are like this. It's nuanced. We're all different. That's like people from China saying, oh, we'll deal with and we'll communicate with Australians because they're all the same. So we need to actually understand the nuances. We can't just put a frame around a certain culture, a certain ethnicity. Okay? Really important skill set to have, to actually be able to work interculturally. And I think intercultural communication is probably key to one of the challenges for professional communicators in this day. Then finally, the role of socially constructed relationships and emergence. So I think this is a really important paper too. So the relationship, and I excuse the typo, between organisational knowledge and the role of communication. Knowledge is emergent and maintained in networks of connections. In other words, it is socially constructed and relational. Look back at previous lectures. Connections are increasingly dependent on communication technologies. Context and discipline, culture, they're culture dependent. And I suggest you read chapters 4, 5, 10 and 11 of Canary et al. If you wish to. Jackson and Williamson in chapter 4 clearly articulate the challenges of using managerial approaches. So This limits an organisation's ability to leverage the power of emergence, the moments of serendipity that occur in communication that underpin indeterminate knowledge-seeking practices. A culture and environment in which these moments can occur naturally and frequently creates a significant competitive advantage by virtue of knowledge-seeking practices that are inimitable and non-substitutable. Now, I'm going to run out of time, so I'm going to urge you to look at this table, because it's really important. The concept behind this is that we want to have everything centralised. We want to have our knowledge systems centralised. That's okay, but we actually have to allow for the unanticipated. We have to allow for emergence in those communicative spaces. We need to have communicative practices where we actually have innovation. That is so important. So this is a real challenge for professional communicators to allow that to emerge. So the references are as per module 4 of the subject. So please email me. if you have any other questions at all. Sorry this has been quick, but I think it's really important to give you a brief